everyone, to today's Roundtable on campus anti-Semitism. Since the horrific October 7 terrorist attack, we've seen an explosion of anti-Semitism on college campuses. Across the country, Jewish students have been harassed, assaulted, intimidated, and subjected to hostile environments. According to the Anti-Defamation League, 73% of Jewish college students experienced or witnessed anti-Semitism in the first few months of the 2023 school year. Since October 7th, fewer than half of Jewish students feel physically safe on campus, while a majority are uncomfortable with others on campus, even knowing they are Jewish. This committee will continue to hold universities accountable. Today, we will hear from 9 students about the anti-Semitism they and their fellow students are experiencing and how their administrations are responding. I want to thank our student panelists, Shabbos Kestenbaum, Noah Rubin, Talia Khan, Eden Yadegar, Kevin Feigelis, Hannah Schlacter, Joe Gindi, Yasmeen, Ohebsion, and Jacob Khalili for their participation. I applaud your leadership in combating anti-Semitism on your campuses and having the courage to speak out. Your testimonies will help inform the committee's ongoing investigation into anti-Semitism in post-secondary education. Even after December's hearing, university leaders are still not correcting course. Let me be clear. This is not about policing speech or opinions, even if disagreeable or offensive. It is about protecting Jewish students from the harassment, threats, intimidation, and assaults plaguing their campuses. As universities are obligated to under Title VI, but have repeatedly failed to do. That failure is unacceptable. Again, I want to thank our panelists for speaking today, and I hope their voices will be heard by the leaders of their institutions as well. Thank you again for being here. I now yield to Ranking Member Scott for his opening statement.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Foxx, for hosting this important conversation. I also want to thank each of our students for being here today to share their stories and experience. Colleges have the responsibility to create safe and collaborative spaces for students to grow and learn. Unfortunately, it's clear that our universities have become increasingly more polarized. We should also acknowledge that anti-Semitism in America is nothing new. Any student of history knows that discrimination did not start with the October 7th attacks, nor did it start with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. We should do more. We should do well to recall this country as a centuries-long history of racism and white supremacy, and our campuses have always been a battleground in the fight for tolerance and understanding. Today, we have a chance to hear from students on the actions and attitudes they face while simply trying to live their lives on campus. I remind my colleagues that this is an opportunity that Democrats were denied 7 years ago when committee Democrats called for a hearing on campus climate when white supremacists marched through the University of Virginia grounds shouting, "Jews will not replace us." We were not able to get a hearing then. The safety and dignity of our students is just important today as it should have been 7 years ago. Regrettably, despite clear evidence that anti-Semitic, anti-Arab, and other instances of racial discrimination and hostility are rising on our college campuses over the past few years and have risen precipitously since October 7th, many of my colleagues continue to undermine the ongoing work of the Department of Education to ensure that colleges and universities uphold their obligation under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and that is to ensure safe learning environments for all students. In fact, House Republicans are currently proposing the Office of Civil Rights, or OCR, cutting that budget by more than 40%. And this is the very office charged with protecting students' rights on campus. And if we're to effectively address the anti-Semitism on campus, we have to address all forms of discrimination on campus so that all students are protected. Last year, the White House released the first United States national strategy to combat anti-Semitism, and under the strategic goal entitled Addressing Anti-Semitism in K-12 and college campuses, the sole request of Congress was to use our power of the purse to fully fund OCR. OCR literally has thousands of open cases and investigations and needs more attorneys and investigators to do the work. And as urgent as cases of shared ancestry discrimination are, and that's the category in which anti-Semitism cases would be heard, shared ancestry discrimination, those cases constitute roughly 1% of the 10,000 open cases OCR is handling. As Dr. King reminded us in his letter from the Birmingham jail, justice too long delayed is justice denied. And even with their already strained resources, the Department of Education and OCR have taken considerable steps to work with impacted communities and provide practical resources and training on preventing and addressing anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, racism, anti-gay discrimination and hate, and they have opened shared ancestry discrimination cases on campuses and in school systems across the country to investigate allegations, and including some of the ones we'll hear today. If we're going to get serious about addressing campus discrimination and hate, we need to give OCR the tools it needs to investigate these claims. So I want to thank the students for their willing to testify today, and I hope this is an opportunity for our colleges to understand the importance of why we must take meaningful actions to address all forms of hate on college campuses. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Scott. I will add, only weeks after the October 7 terrorist attack by Hamas, FBI Director Chris Wray said anti-Semitism is reaching historic levels in the U.S., and that while Jews are only 2.4% of the U.S. population, they account for around 60% of religious-based hate crimes. The evidence is clear that there's an epidemic of anti-Semitism on college campuses. We've seen terrifying videos from campuses around the country. And as I noted in my opening statement, 73% of Jewish college students have experienced or witnessed anti-Semitism, and less than half feel physically safe on campus. We need to recognize that this is an emergency unique to Jewish students, faculty, and staff, and respond accordingly. Before we hear from our distinguished panel, I want to address everyone's attention to the screen for a video that illustrates why we are here today.
You in the streets, we will close down the bridges, we will disrupt you in restaurants, we will turn your life into a nightmare.
The work does not stop until our homeland is liberated, from the river to the sea.
We are a public fucking university serving capitalist issues, serving Zionists. I was in a meeting where I was told that the administration could not handle responding to the fucking Zionists. To the Zionists on the university?
Long live Palestine!
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
So fucking lucky. Fuck you guys. Fucking bootlickers.
Go back to Moscow and Brooklyn and Stad and fucking Berlin, where you came from.
With that, it's time to hear from our students. We'll begin with Shabbos, Kestenbaum, and then proceed down the line in order. Shabbos, you may begin.
Madam Chairwoman, Ranking Member Scott, and the bipartisan members of this committee, including my own Congressman, Richie Torres. I want to thank you for having me this afternoon. By inviting me, you've actually already done more than Harvard University has ever done for its Jews, which is listening to us. My name is Shabbos Kestenbaum. I'm a second-year master's student at Harvard. I'm a proud Jew, I'm a proud American, and yes, I'm a proud progressive. Members of this committee, if anti-Semitism was an infectious disease, Harvard University would have instituted mask mandates and social distancing decades ago. All I need is 3 weeks to prove my point. On Thursday, January 4th, I woke up to dozens of fellow Harvard students posting on the social media app SideChat that Jews are both baby killers and pedophiles, lamenting the outsized role Jews play in media and politics, and arguing that, quote, too many damn Jews run this country. On Sunday, January 21st, the day before the spring semester at Harvard was to begin, every single poster calling attention to the kidnapped Jewish civilians in Gaza was vandalized, with Jewish victims being compared to Jeffrey Epstein and of orchestrating 9/11. In one particular instance, the vandals wrote, "Evidence needed, head still on a now 12-month-old baby, Kfir Bibas, the youngest hostage taken, who remains separated from his family more than 140 days later." There was no response from Harvard until CNN and Fox News got involved. I even wrote to Harvard DEI telling them I would miss my first day of class to take down these anti-Semitic posters. On the morning of Thursday, January 25th, I received an email from a Harvard employee challenging me to debate him in a secluded underpass as to whether Jews orchestrated 9/11. That night, that same Harvard employee posted a video on his social media with a machete and a picture of my face saying he wants to fight and has a plan. For 3 days, I had private armed security outside my house. I had armed security follow me to Shabbat prayer services for my own protection. While I immediately flagged this issue to Harvard and to the police, this individual is still employed by Harvard. This is the reality of being a Jew at Harvard in 2024. On a student-run Harvard panel, I was immediately removed after asking classmates to consider demanding Hamas release its Jewish hostages instead of an unconditional ceasefire that they were promoting. On a different Harvard student-run online forum, after I had posted a similar question, students responded, and I quote, "We are taking a do not engage with Shabbos Kestenbaum approach over my morally reprehensible views." On yet another Harvard student-run online forum, after I'd pointed out that a featured speaker advertised by Harvard students called the October 7th massacre a quote, glorious day and about time, a fellow student responded, and I quote, "I am still comfortable promoting this event." The bullying, intimidation, and ostracizing of Jewish students at Harvard is not only normalized, it is promoted. In fact, this week alone, we Jewish students, led by the incredible Harvard Chabad organization, were forced to hire private armed security for a concert in honor of Jewish victims of anti-Semitism after a group of Harvard students encouraged the protesting of the event, shouting, "Globalize the Intifada and resistance is justified." Tellingly, Harvard DEI told me they wouldn't do anything about it because it, quote, falls outside their purview. Oddly, they did not say this about George Floyd, Ukraine, affirmative action, or Roe v. Wade. On the night of October 7th, when I and countless other Jewish students were desperately trying to see whether my siblings were alive or not, 34 student groups at Harvard, representing hundreds of students, jumped out of their beds, some in their pajamas, to draft what they called an emergency statement to blame Jews for the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. I know these students. I sit in class with them. I share study halls with them. They publicly praise Hamas. They support the Houthis. They believe Hezbollah to be a legitimate political resistance group. To this day, Harvard has not condemned any one of these 34 student groups. But the anti-Semitism, and with this, I promise I'll close, the anti-Semitism and Hamas sympathies do not rest on the students alone. It extends to and is promoted by the Harvard faculty. Just last week, close to 100 Harvard faculty and staff published a cartoon depicting a Jewish man replete with the Star of David and the money symbol, choking an Arab and black man by the neck with a noose. These faculty have not been disciplined in any way. They continue to be provided a platform to spread their poison with impunity. I pass them in the hallways and try not to make eye contact. In fact, in 3 days' time, Harvard will proudly host anti-Semite Nora Erekat, who participated on a panel with an internationally designated terrorist and senior Hamas commander, Ghazi Hamad, who has repeatedly promised, quote, 1 million more October 7ths. I know of Jewish students at Harvard who do not wear their kippahs publicly anymore, who have changed their major due to hostile anti-Zionist and anti-Jewish environments and have been spat on for their religious identity. While I can provide countless more examples and heart-wrenching testimony, it is best that I conclude as follows. I have seldom experienced such disdain for and contempt of a minority group than the way in which Harvard treats its Jewish student population. If anti-Semitism is a disease, then certainly Harvard University is the Wuhan wet market. The time for Congress to act is now. Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you. Noah, you're recognized.
My name is Noah Rubin. I'm 21 years old from South Florida, and I'm a student at the University of Pennsylvania. I want to begin by expressing my deep gratitude to the committee for organizing this critical event. It's been 86 days since former President McGill exposed to the world the indifference and lack of moral clarity that has persisted on UPenn's campus. Since then, not only has the Jew hatred continued, but the bigoted individuals, including our own faculty, have become emboldened. The pattern of harassment, threats, and even violence towards Jewish students rages on. I have devoted countless hours when I should have been studying to meeting with the administration about addressing anti-Semitism. Every time I've been met with nothing more than meaningless words and empty promises. I'm also currently a member of the Jewish Student Advisory Board. We've been given exactly 3 hours to meet this semester. Like you 2 months ago, I've been told over and over again that the university is taking these issues seriously, but always no action. In September, I met with public safety to plead they do more to protect Jewish students. I was told that Hillel, the Jewish Cultural Center, was one of the safest buildings on our campus. Just 2 days later, Hillel was broken into and vandalized by a perpetrator who was yelling, "Fuck the Jews." 2 months later, a bomb threat was received, and now I find myself looking over my shoulder, even in Hillel. Last semester ended with a mob of students, faculty, and extremists marching through our campus, vandalizing school buildings, lighting smoke bombs, and chanting vicious chants in English and Arabic. Despite these and countless other anti-Semitic incidents, our Jewish institutions still do not get reliable and basic university support on security. Seriously, our Jewish institutions still do not get reliable and basic university support on security. And the saga continues. Just this past weekend, a student group, Penn Against the Occupation, posted on Instagram condemning Jewish professors and exposing their names, faces, and positions. They have posted support of Hamas, genocidal chants, and now this. On Monday, a protest that stormed through campus started with calls for an intifada, which means globalizing violence to Jews everywhere, and finished with screaming, "We won't stop at a ceasefire." Students who commented on the protest in a private Jewish group chat later found their names and phone numbers posted on the internet. Dwayne Booth, a lecturer, has created and published horrifying political cartoons that are actually blood libel cartoons. And not only is he still teaching, his personal website is still on his official UPenn faculty bio. Why is he still employed? You heard at the last hearing that context matters. Here's the context. It's open season on Jews on our campus, and continued inaction is unacceptable. It's time to wake up, America. This is the story of Jews on UPenn's campus and students across the country. We're living in a climate of hatred and fear. I urge you to help us. Thank you.
Eden, you're recognized.
Stunning, astonishing, awesome, jubilant, achievement. These are the words that a professor at my university used to describe the deadliest massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust. I wish I could say that the use of such abhorrent rhetoric by a Columbia professor and the toleration of it by our administration was an isolated instance. But his words are merely a symptom of an institution and an accelerating spiral of moral rot. Chairwoman Foxx, Ranking Member Scott, and distinguished committee members, thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Eden Yadegar, and I am a junior at Columbia University, double majoring in Middle East Studies and Jewish Studies. I am 20 years old and the daughter of American immigrants who fled Iran 45 years ago to escape the life-threatening anti-Semitism that infected their country. I am grateful to be a student at Columbia, but I am horrified that the same Jew hate that drove my family to the US has become normalized here. It is pervasive in classrooms, across campus, in student groups, and online. It has even stained our hub of Jewish life, Columbia Barnard Hillel, with, quote, "Long live the Palestinian armed struggle," and shouts of Free Palestine. This semester, I am unable to complete my Middle East Studies major, as intended, because the only course offered about Israel is taught by the professor who referred to the massacre and rape of innocent people, of young women just like me, as stunning, astonishing, awesome, jubilant achievement. We are ostracized, mocked, harassed, assaulted, and scapegoated because of our identities. "Fuck the Jews," yelled at visibly Jewish friends of mine on multiple separate occasions. Online, Columbia students suggested labeling local shops that support Israel's right to exist, quote, "with a Star of David." Is this 1938 or 2024? A law professor recently advocated for the removal of Israeli students from campus. Another professor claimed to be with Hamas days before Columbia extended him a, quote, "warm welcome" in January. We have been attacked with sticks outside of our library. We have been surrounded by angry mobs, and we have been threatened to, quote, "keep fucking running." How many more times must it be proven that unreprimanded, violent rhetoric can lead to physical violence? I am mocked as I walk through my campus and mocked on social media. "Fuck her," a classmate publicly commented on a post of me, seeking to denigrate me for speaking about the tensions on campus. Well, I have a message for anyone who would seek to silence us. We are not Jews with trembling knees. We are proud Jews who carry with us the tradition of resilience in the face of persecution, and we will not be silenced. I came to Columbia to learn from those with experiences and opinions vastly different from my own. I came to Columbia hoping to pursue the American dream in the same way that my parents did when moving here from Iran. Instead, that dream has turned into a nightmare. Thank you.
Jacob, you're recognized.
My name is Jacob Khalili. I am a senior electrical engineering student at the Cooper Union. I am here today because I feel an obligation to stand up for my peers and share with the committee the disturbing reality of our campus experience. I want to focus today on the widely publicized and alarming event that took place at the Cooper Union Library a few weeks after the Hamas attack on Israel. On the afternoon of October 25th, I and other Jewish students had gathered in the library following an anti-Israel demonstration in which fellow Cooper Union students were spewing hateful chants justifying Hamas's massacre, calling for violence against Jews worldwide, and demanding an end to our ancestral homeland. We had come to the library to try to process the demonstration, but very quickly, the situation devolved into an alarming experience, one that went viral and became to represent the perils of anti-Semitism on campus. The demonstrators, who had pushed their way past campus security, descended upon the library like a mob. They found the library doors locked and began violently rattling the doors to force their way in. Unable to enter, they began pounding on the glass surrounding the library, all while screaming anti-Israel, anti-Semitic chants. Some of my friends were crying. Several of us were texting loved ones and calling the police for help. Neither campus security nor the police removed the demonstrators, who finally left. I was shocked and horrified to learn that President Sparks had been offered yet refused police intervention, and that at some point she had ducked out of a back exit to avoid the demonstrators. To my knowledge, the school has taken no disciplinary action against the demonstrators, which clearly conveys the message that anti-Jewish activity on campus will be tolerated. This tolerance for hatred is further evidenced by the ongoing presence of intimidating speech, graffiti, and posters on campus. Our pleas for a safe educational environment free from threatening harassment and intimidation seems to fall on deaf ears. Jewish students, like all students, have the right to pursue their education free from intimidation and harassment. The events at the Cooper Union underscore the urgent need for action that protects this right. In sharing my experience, I hope this committee will recognize the severity of anti-Semitism in academic institutions and take swift action. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you today and for all your important work.
Thank you. Hannah Beth, you're recognized.
My name is Hannah Schlacter. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, but have called the California Bay Area my home for 7 years. I'm 28 years old. I'm an American pursuing my MBA at the University of California, Berkeley, Haas School of Business. I chose Berkeley Haas because of top rankings and culture fit. Thank you, Chairwoman Foxx, Ranking Member Scott, and esteemed Congress members for giving me this opportunity. I was more than prepared to give this opening before Monday night, but I had to rewrite my remarks due to a violent riot targeting Jews at Berkeley. You may not have heard about it. That appears to be a trend with anti-Semitism and how Berkeley wants it. The short of it, a Jewish Israeli speaker was on campus. The known group, Bears for Palestine, decided to violently protest the event, smashing the locked doors of the location, breaking glass, threatening the participants, and starting a riot on campus. This is not a one-off. This has been the mood and situation at Berkeley since October 7th. It's not safe to be a Jewish student at UC Berkeley. Since October 7th, I've been fighting to tell the story of the ignored hostilities towards Jewish students on campus. I finally met with Campus Police Chief Pittman 2 weeks ago. It took months to even be recognized by authorities on campus that there are massive problems with Jewish student safety. I'm not alone in pushing to meet with the chief. How are we supposed to feel safe on campus if the authorities don't recognize us? It's astounding that the chief did not know where Berkeley Hillel, the Jewish center, is located, let alone how to pronounce it. Chief Pittman was the assistant chief of the US Capitol Police during the January 6th riot. Safety doesn't appear to be her priority. It's not safe to be a Jewish student at UC Berkeley. I did not go to class Tuesday. How could I when Berkeley will not protect Jews from a riot? I am not alone in these feelings. It's impossible to be a student at a renowned university and yet feel completely isolated, vulnerable, and alone. Since October 7th, I actively hide parts of my Jewish identity on campus. Berkeley actively fosters an environment where Jewish students are not given equal opportunity to learn in classrooms or participate in extracurriculars. Instead of providing a safe environment for education, Berkeley tells Jews to stay away from campus, hoping this will pass over. It's not safe to be a Jewish student at UC Berkeley.
Joe, you're recognized.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Joe J. Gindi. I'm 21 years old, from Brooklyn, New York, a Syrian Jew, and a sophomore at Rutgers University. I would like to thank the chair and the committee for hosting this important roundtable today. I am here today because Jew hatred has become rampant at Rutgers University, and it has become clear that some members of the school's administration and faculty are complicit in allowing and even in encouraging this hate to grow. I'm here today in the hope that my remarks will be a catalyst for action so that Jewish students like myself feel safe and welcome at Rutgers, not harassed, threatened, and invisible. I'm here today to say it is time to wake up, America, and understand what is happening on our college campuses. In the interest of time, I'll share only a few examples of what we've experienced. On November 17th, the Students for Justice in Palestine stormed the Rutgers University College Avenue Student Center and took it over. I was standing outside of the Student Center. I was called a murderer. People screamed at me, "We don't want Zionists here." They called me a European colonizer because I am Jewish. Ironic, since my family came to America from Aleppo, Halab, Syria. Jewish students caught inside of the Student Center were forced to flee. I was horrified, but what shocked me the most was the reaction of the police officers and administrators at the scene. At the direction of officials from the school administration, police on the scene did nothing, allowing SJP to march in and take over the student center. On November 27th, SJP overran the business school, chanting, disrupting classes, and turning the building into an area where Jews were afraid to enter. This was, again, another clear violation of the code of conduct. Jewish students were afraid to leave their classrooms, and numerous faculty members reported being terrified of this mob. Most egregiously, Rutgers administrators facilitated this, literally opening the door for agitators to enter the building. But there are some Rutgers staff who are more obvious with their Jew hatred. At one rally, a Rutgers University program coordinator screamed at Jewish students, and I apologize for the profanity, fuck you, colonizer, fuck you, Zionist." The actions of these staff members effectively denied Jewish students equal access to campus resources, and many students, like myself, do not feel safe reaching out for help. Justice requires the equal application of the law. So too, the code of conduct can only protect all students if the university enforces the rules equally. Unfortunately, at Rutgers University, like at many other campuses, there appears to be a selective enforcement of these rules. They just don't seem to apply when it comes to Jewish students. There's so much more that I can share. I didn't come to college to study in a living laboratory of anti-Semitism, which is what Rutgers has become. Jews at Rutgers are afraid. It feels like we've lost all support lines and don't know where to go. I'm here today to ask you, our United States lawmakers, for your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Yasmeen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Foxx, Ranking Member Scott, and distinguished members of the committee for inviting us here today. My name is Yasmeen Ohebsion, and in January of 2023, I became the co-president of the Movement to Address Antisemitism at Tulane. I have met with university administrators almost 24 times. I am a Jewish, first-generation American student. My father fled Iran due to religious persecution, including systemic anti-Semitism. Where almost 100,000 Jews once lived, only a handful remain. I never imagined that I would have to fight for the basic right to safely pursue my education in the very land that my family fled to, seeking safety and dignity. I'm sharing my story in hopes that Americans will hear firsthand what is happening on our campuses. Since my time is limited, I'd like to share just a few examples of what my peers and I have experienced at Tulane. On October 26th, I was on campus walking to the Jewish Studies department when a woman accosted me and screamed in my face, "Fuck you, Jew." This is my reality as a Jewish student who wears a Star of David. I reported this incident, and the response was to mischaracterize this anti-Semitism as political speech and offer me mental health resources. No other action was taken. On the same day, the hostility of the anti-Israel protesters escalated from hate speech to physical violence as they beat several of my Jewish friends with flagpoles, megaphones, fists, and a belt. One Jewish student was hospitalized. An official Tulane Instagram account posted a flyer that included disturbing silhouettes glorifying the paraglider terrorists who burned, raped, mutilated, and slaughtered Jews on October 7th. How can an administration that promotes these images on its own Instagram account possibly be part of the solution to eradicate anti-Semitism? When a group of Tulane students approached Tulane's EDI office because they felt unsafe on campus after experiencing a slew of anti-Semitic incidents, they were instructed to document these incidents. These students did not receive a response from the EDI office for 6 weeks. Their document still has not been acknowledged by the EDI office almost 3 months later. To be clear, this is the office responsible for ridding our campus of discrimination and ensuring that all students are treated fairly. I am one person representing countless students who feel the way I do, threatened verbally and physically on campus, unable to enjoy the freedom to study in a country that is known and admired for its academic freedoms, and ignored by the individuals on campus employed to ensure we are kept safe and treated fairly. I am here imploring you, our policymakers, to compel my university to step up and show us what American values look like. We will not be silent until they act. Thank you. Am Yisrael Chai.
Kevin, you're recognized.
Dirty Jew, monster, colonizer, child killer. These are the names we are given at Stanford, labels that strip us of our humanity, our dignity, and our identity. These are the names a dozen Stanford students hurled in my face one night in November as they surrounded me. They called my people dirty Jews, that were disgusting monsters, that makes them sick to look at me. Me, who has been to Israel only once. Me, who grew up in New Jersey, one of the most diverse states of the country. Me, who was raised in a broken household by a single mother. Me, who had to fight tooth and nail to get where I am today. Why? They know nothing about me besides the fact that I wear a kippah on my head, that I am a Jew. But I am not just a nameless Jew. I have an identity. My name is Kevin Feigelis. I'm a PhD student who has been at Stanford since 2016. In that time, I've watched my campus transform from an idyllic paradise, a center of learning, into a wasteland of hatred where every interaction is a minefield. I do not spend my time attacking other students, but for the past 5 months, other students spent their time attacking me. I see the smiles on their faces as they march in their thousands across campus calling for the deaths of Jews. I hear the victory in their voices as they disrupt classes and bring learning to a standstill. I sense their triumph as they get the university to capitulate to their demands because Stanford refuses to control this mob. Even the university president's house was vandalized. On October 7th, while Israel was still being ransacked by terrorists and innocent civilians were being raped and murdered, Stanford students were celebrating the carnage, praising Hamas's actions. That very day, banners sprouted up across campus saying, "Israel is burning." It is now 5 months later, and I say with horror and fear that Stanford is burning. Do you want to know what is worse than a university not holding students accountable and enforcing their policies? A university that has openly changed its policies to placate a mob. That is the reality of Stanford. I come here today before Congress to ask you all, please step in and help us. Please hold our universities accountable. Please investigate the root causes of anti-Semitism in our colleges. In my written testimony, I include 7 clear and comprehensive areas that require extensive investigation. I implore you to read through these carefully. As my friend at Harvard and UPenn can tell you, it doesn't end simply because the presidents are replaced. Systemic change is needed. The universities have proven they have no intention of fixing themselves. It must be you, and it must be now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Talia, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Foxx. Thank you for having me here. My name is Talia Khan from Phoenix, Arizona. I am an undergraduate alumna of MIT and a current graduate student at MIT. I am the daughter of a Jewish mother and an Afghan Muslim father, and the president of the MIT-Israel Alliance. I am here today because MIT has become overrun with toxic anti-Semitism. I used to be proud to call MIT my home for the past 8 years. However, in the past 5 months, I've become traumatized, hearing violent chants to raise up your 2 fists and sacrifice everything for Palestine, cheers for armed resistance on campus, and calls to hold a knife to their throats. Memories of the screaming hate mob that took over MIT's main entrance, Lobby 7, to block the main student pathway to class now echoes in my mind every time I walk the halls of MIT. MIT has become overrun by terrorist supporters that directly threaten the lives of Jews on our campus. Members of the Anti-Israel Club have stated that violence against any Jew who supports Israel, including women and children, is acceptable. When this was reported to President Kornbluth and senior MIT administration, the issue was never dealt with. Then, administrators pleaded ignorance when we reminded them that no actions had been taken, saying that they either forgot about it or missed the email. How would you feel being paired up in a study group with a student who has stated that it is justifiable to kill you because of your identity? This is my reality. This is the reality for Jews on MIT's campus today. Jews are forced to tiptoe around, being careful to follow all rules to a T, hiding our Jewish clothing and symbols, while anti-Israel students and faculty bring outside mobs to continue to break the rules uninhibited by the feckless MIT administration. I am left scared and vulnerable as the MIT administration repeatedly intimidates me and other Jews into taking our Israeli flags down from our offices, though we still see Palestinian flags and flags representing other nationalities and identities waving freely around campus. What is happening at MIT is a scandal, and we will continue to call it out until leaders in our schools and in our government acknowledge it and do something. The faculty who took part on the Faculty Anti-Semitism Advisory Committee grew so tired of being discounted and ignored by Kornbluth's administration that every single one of them resigned. Jewish staff members at the MIT Israel internship offices told administrators they felt their lives were at risk as a mob of anti-Israel students attempted to break into their offices banging on doors and windows, trying to unlock doors, and screaming that these staff people were committing genocide. No action was taken to discipline this behavior. We have DEI administrators, an interfaith chaplain, and faculty who have openly supported Hamas as martyrs, harassed individual Jewish students online, and publicly supported anti-Semitic blood libel conspiracy theories. The MIT administration seems only to listen to those faculty and members of the MIT Corporation who help them continue to gaslight Jewish students and faculty, telling us we're being overly dramatic and should just, quote, go back to Israel if we don't feel safe studying here. It is not overly dramatic to ask that something be done when our very existence is under threat. Mauricio Karchmer, who taught the popular Introduction to Algorithms class to 60% of all MIT undergrads, resigned last month. He said that he no longer felt comfortable teaching at MIT because the MIT administration has done nothing tangible to address or combat anti-Semitism on campus. MIT lets anti-Semitism fester and grow while Jews are forced to decide, can I stay here one more day? Can I survive one more day of this never-ending trauma? For Professor Karchmer and several other Israeli students, the answer was no. There is a Jewish brain drain occurring at MIT. For America to maintain its status as the most innovative country in the world, we must ensure safety for all in our leading academic institutions like MIT. Losing great minds at MIT to shelter terrorism-supporting student groups is a national security threat, and everyone on and off campus should be concerned. These failures by MIT are not just a threat to us as Jewish students, they are a threat to who we are as Americans. I am the child of an Afghan Muslim immigrant and an Ashkenazi Jewish Ohioan, but most importantly, I am an American. I am the embodiment of America's promise of freedom for all people, no matter who they are or what they believe. And I have the right to an educational experience free from threats and marginalization because of who I am. US government funding is meant to enable schools like MIT to spread knowledge. Now is the time to act, to make sure federal dollars are not being used to spread hate and discourage Jewish academics. I still believe in MIT and its mission to advance knowledge and educate students in science and technology. But it has strayed too far, and we need your help to get it back on track. I call upon Congress and our institutions to take clear steps and use all the powers at their disposal to protect every student, faculty, and staff member at MIT, including Jews. Thank you.
I thank the students for those very powerful statements. I know members have questions for you, and I'm going to ask, although we don't have timers here, I'm going to be sensitive to the time because we have many members here who want to ask questions. And so I'm going to ask members to ask short questions and the students to please answer succinctly so that I don't have to call time on anyone. Mr. Moran has let me know about a specific time constraint he has, so I'm recognizing him first. Then Representative Manning, I plan to recognize you, and then Representative Stefanik, you'll be next. So again, I ask you all to ask fairly short questions, and I ask the students to give short answers. So Representative Moran.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I certainly want to say from the outset that acts of hate emanate from hearts filled with hate. Our colleges and universities have a responsibility to ensure that they do not cultivate this environment of hate or racism by their action or by their inaction. Acts of intimidation and harassment, as have been described by many of you here today, are simply unacceptable and must be punished, must be disciplined on our college campuses and universities. Unfortunately, it's pretty clear from your testimony that anti-Semitism has found its prominent place among our college campuses across the United States, from the East Coast to the West Coast. It doesn't matter where you're at these days. It is obvious It is systemic across our colleges and universities. And this is simply unacceptable. The stories we've heard today are atrocious and have no place in the United States whatsoever. There's a clear distinction between free speech and honest debate on the one hand, and acts of intimidation and harassment that are used by groups that push for the annihilation of another race on the other hand. One is constitutionally protected and one is not. Just this week, as has been described on the University of California, Berkeley campus, many were forced to evacuate after protesters stormed an event with Israeli Defense Forces. You described that, Ms. Schlacter. Thank you for that description. One of the ways that colleges have promoted this anti-Semitic behavior, I think, is through their DEI offices, which I don't understand because it's exactly contrary to the purposes and the mission of these DEI offices that have been set up. Yasmeen, you described this at Tulane about the 6-week delay, and that's where I'm going to start with my questions, and I'll come back with a few more comments. But I want to know more about this 6-week delay. You described a complaint that had been filed with Tulane, and 6 weeks, no response from the DEI office. I was online after you mentioned that, trying to look at the DEI office of Tulane and some of the things that they do, and I'm going to read you some of the description of what they do. But tell the folks more about what you saw in that 6-week delay. What has happened as a result of that? Have you heard any response at all?
Thank you for your question. So medical students of Tulane's medical school reached out to the DEI office expressing that they felt unsafe after a slew of anti-Semitic incidents, including swastikas carved into classrooms. Those students approached the DEI office, and they were instructed by this office to create a detailed document explaining all of the incidents, how they made them feel, and how the university could respond. After sending that document to the university, they didn't even receive a reply at all for 6 weeks. The reply after 6 weeks on one of the last days of last semester included something along the lines of, "Our office is always open if you want to talk." Those students have not received a response that addresses their document at all, and they're hopeless at this point.
Yeah, and it's not surprising to me because at one of our earlier hearings, we actually heard from some DEI offices, and one of the things they said was, well, we were kind of caught off guard because we weren't set up to deal with issues where the victim was white or was not of color. And so that's problematic to me when you're talking about a DEI office that's supposed to be in the business of ensuring that all students feel included, all students get services. In this particular case, they're not. I want to go back to our first speaker, Mr. Kestenbaum. You spoke a little bit about this as well. In your experience at your university, do you think that your DEI office is responding appropriately to the concerns of Jewish students?
I used to think that the DMV had bad bureaucracy, and then I met DEI. To call them useless would be an understatement. They have festered anti-Semitism time and time again on their campus. They have refused to take any meaningful action. Their hypocrisy, their double standard is so obvious, is so hurtful, is so offensive. It is remarkable that U.S. tax dollars are funding, in many cases, these offices. As you quite rightly pointed out, Congressman, they have a mentality of oppressor and oppressed. Jews are white, Jews are oppressors. So when we say that it is an unsafe environment, physically, spiritually, and mentally, they don't have the capacity to even understand what that means.
I think that the policies and the actions of these universities, along with the systems and the frameworks of their DEI programs, are flawed, and they work against the missions of the universities to provide a safe learning environment to seek knowledge and truth and to encourage peaceful debate. And while touting their success of inclusion, the DEI offices of these universities have simply failed to protect and defend Jewish students on their campuses. Madam Chairwoman, I applaud you and Ranking Member for having this hearing today, and the Education Workforce Committee for not letting this go. We had a meaningful hearing in the fall, which caused, I think, massive ripples across universities across the United States. But unfortunately, from the stories we're hearing today, It hasn't changed enough. More must change, and it must change immediately to protect our students. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Moran. Congresswoman Manning, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank each of our witnesses for being here today and for your detailed and very compelling statements. Not one of you went to college to be a warrior for the Jewish people, and yet here you are today, putting yourselves at risk by speaking out, condemning anti-Semitism, and telling the world what is going on campuses across this country. I want to thank you for that. As the lead co-chair of the House Bipartisan Task Force to combat anti-Semitism, I want you to know that we are taking this issue very seriously, and I'm working on legislation to try to figure out how we in Congress can address these issues. But I have to tell you, as I hear your stories, I cannot help but wonder, is this 1932 Germany all over again? Is this Russia in 1903 when my grandparents fled the deadly pogroms and came to this country seeking refuge from anti-Semites? Every one of us in Congress should be asking ourselves, how did we get here? And what can we do to stop this? My goal today is twofold: to find ways that we can keep Jewish students safe, and to make sure that our Middle East Studies departments have the diversity of thought required by Title VI of the Higher Education Act. And that means Middle East Studies departments that have professors who actually support the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish and democratic state. So, Mr. Kestenbaum, let me start with you. There was certainly anti-Semitism when I was a student at Harvard, but it was the old kind of anti-Semitism, the old country club anti-Semitism that was unspoken but understood. But what you have described is incredibly horrifying and would be unacceptable if it were applied to any other minority group. I would have thought that a great institution of education would use the rise of anti-Semitism as an opportunity to teach its students about the perils of anti-Semitism or any kind of discrimination and what happens when that goes unchecked. So I ask you, what would you like to see Harvard do to combat this plague of hatred?
So thank you for the question, Congresswoman. The situation at Harvard is so bad that we really only had two options. One was to come here, which we are doing, and the other was to hold them account in a court of law. We filed a lawsuit. I'm one of 6 plaintiffs who are making sure that if Harvard won't amend the terrible plague of anti-Semitism, that a court of law will. In terms of what you can be doing as the United States Congress, number one, subpoena, subpoena, subpoena. You would be horrified to see what is going on behind the scenes. Why is it, as you mentioned, that Harvard so willingly and enthusiastically accepts tens of millions of dollars every year from anti-Western, anti-democratic, anti-Semitic countries? Where is that money going to? Why is it that the Center for Middle Eastern Studies, as you said, the Religion and Public Life Department, DEI offices, why is it that they're so incapable of having that freedom of intellectual thought? Why is it that they're so incapable of including Jews in these conversations? Why is it that they're so comfortable promoting Hamas, inviting terrorist sympathizers to come to their campus? Harvard has a strong track record of disciplining speech that they do not like. The only single exception is Jews. The only single exception is Jews. And so I ask all of you, I implore you, I beg of you, you are our last hope.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Stefanik for her question, Representative Stefanik for her questions.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Foxx, and thank you to each of the students for bravely sharing your testimony of your experiences that you have faced on campus, the inexcusable, hateful, and vicious anti-Semitism that these universities have allowed to take root, and it is a rot that goes deep. One of you testified that it's not just about university presidents being removed, but the fact that that had to be pushed on places like Harvard for over a month was inexcusable. We need to continue to make sure that there is accountability to root out this rot of anti-Semitism. It is clear it's not just Harvard, Penn, and MIT, but each of these university leaders have failed. It is atrocious to hear the experiences that each of you have faced, whether it's threats of violent act or the horrific anti-Semitic statements. My question is for Mr. Kestenbaum from Harvard, as well as Talia from MIT. Both of those university presidents, one in the case is former, were in that hearing that set off an earthquake and a reckoning. Can you talk to me what the experience has been on campus after that hearing? So you have a removal of one university, and it's gotten worse, the anti-Semitism, and you have the failure for the MIT board to remove the president in Dr. Kornbluth, and it's also gotten worse. Can you walk me through specifically the anti-Semitism task force and some of the other things you weren't able to get to in your testimony?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. And on behalf of the many Harvard students and faculty who are watching this right now, you are a hero for the Jewish community. So really, thank you, Congresswoman. The Anti-Semitism Committee is so remarkably useless that its most respected member and my professor, Rabbi David Wolpe, resigned. It accomplished absolutely nothing. That Harvard's solution was, we're going to create a second task force. The co-chair of this task force is someone who has repeatedly and on the record stated that anti-Semitism at Harvard is, quote, exaggerated. Its other co-chair resigned 3 days ago. I have emailed the anti-Semitism task force more than 40 times, 40. I have not received a single response. When I say that Congress is our last hope, it's because Harvard has refused to take any responsibility, any accountability, and to help Jewish students. All of the acts of anti-Semitism that I listed in my speech all happened after Claudine Gay resigned. And I would also add that Claudine Gay is still getting paid $900,000. So what does that tell you about taking responsibility and protecting Jewish students when someone who can say that the calls for genocide against Jews is context-dependent gets to keep her job?
And MIT, in the case of Dr. Kornbluth, the fact that she remains as president, what message has that sent to the MIT community?
Well, immediately after that hearing, we heard from the MIT Corporation executive board members that they fully supported Dr. Kornbluth in every single thing that she said at that hearing, including her failure to explicitly condemn calls for genocide on campus. And they said that they believe that she is doing a, quote, excellent job in combating anti-Semitism on campus. So immediately after that, we just get gaslighted by the MIT Corporation. And essentially after that, they just doubled down in gaslighting us and in, creating this illusion that we are, a small group crying wolf. And they essentially continue to tell us, oh, we're working on things are happening, we're very concerned, but it's just all lip service. And they play this game where even when we tell them, we got an email from a non-Jewish student who lives with a student who is a leading member of the Anti-Israel Club, who has stated very openly in this dorm that violence against any Jew who supports Israel is acceptable. And when we said this to Dr. Kornbluth and the rest of MIT administration, they acknowledged it, they didn't do anything. And so they're making up these things, calling us, like saying that we are, exaggerating or that they can't police free speech. But this is not about free speech. And I think that's one thing that we've noticed is that there are actual threats. There are people's offices who have been attacked. People have banged on office doors, tried to unlock office doors, and that has nothing to do with free speech. That is people's lives at risk. That is people fearing physical violence. There have been people calling for physical violence on our campus, and literally nothing has been done. And I have to walk through the halls. Every Jew at MIT has to walk through the halls, seeing these people proudly walking around after they've broken rule after rule after rule and not been disciplined. And it's really scary. We are genuinely fearful.
Well, thank you for that answer. And just straight to the cameras, for the lawyers for these universities have failed. If you think this is going to get brushed under the rug, the list is getting longer by the day. This Congress will not stop until we hold you accountable. That's a promise.
Dr. Adams, I recognize you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me just thank the young folks for being here and for sharing your testimony and your stories, which, having been on a college campus as a professor for 40 years, I'm really horrified to hear what you've had to say. And I do want to say to Ms. Khan, you who just talked about free speech, that we do allow free speech here. And we're happy to have you come to the Congress today. But I also want each of you to know that I condemn all forms of discrimination, having grown up with dogs and hoses and all those things against African Americans. I want you to know that is discrimination in any way. Hatred in any form is not something that I personally tolerate. But I do want to ask you, I think it's Mr. Kestenbaum. You talked about the kinds of things that were going on your campus, and I wanted to know, have you or other Jewish students changed your behaviors to avoid possibly being targeted with anti-Semitism or Zionism on your campus or in your daily life?
Absolutely. There are Jewish students at Harvard University that do not wear their skull cap, their kippah, anymore because they are fearful of retaliation. Harvard University purports to be training the next generation of American leaders, of policymakers. I can assure you, if the people in my classroom are America's future policymakers, we are in deep, deep trouble. Jewish students are fearing for their lives. They're not comfortable expressing how they truly feel. They are not comfortable in situations where their professors openly cheer the events of October 7th. And the answers from Harvard, whether it was in their failed anti-Semitism task force, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, now includes the head of DEI, is now an advisor on that task force. Wow. They have repeatedly failed us time and time again.
Thank you for that. Let me follow up briefly and just ask, in terms of the Jewish students on your campus, are you avoiding or choosing to avoid activities where you're likely to encounter a hostile environment? Much of what you talked about sounded to me pretty hostile.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the lawsuit, which is public, and I encourage everyone to read it, you will see that there was, among multiple protests, one protest in particular where they took over Widener Library, which is really the heart and soul of Harvard University. In fact, Senator Dan Sullivan was there, and he was surrounded and accosted by these protesters. These were protesters who were covering their faces so they wouldn't be held to account. These were protesters who were shouting, as you saw in the video, Palestine will be Arab, globalize the Intifada. In one case, a leader of the protest said, we have them, referring to Jews outnumbered. So yes, you can be absolutely sure that I avoided Widener Library that day. And I can assure you, and I have the texts to back it up, that there are other Jewish students who said, and I quote, is it safe to come out now? This is Harvard University.
Thank you both.
I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Owens, you're recognized.
Thank you. I won't take too much time. I want to say this. The blessing of growing up in the 60s is I've seen this movie before. I was the third black to go to the University of Miami, fourth to go to this particular high school. I know what it is and what you're experiencing, and it's hard to believe that in 2024 we're going through this again. Just know it's not by accident. This has been a virus, a cancer that's been going on our higher college for way too long, and I'm thankful for brave students like yourself, because even back in the 60s, there was a young black boys and girls who sit at these counters to say this: we will not stand for this segregation anymore. What you're doing right now is historic, and we're going to make a difference because American people, once we understand and see the truth and see what's going on, see hatred, which is not in our DNA, we respond very, very well with that. I'll say this: the reason why it's happening is because of college professors and leaders that are bullies and cowards. It's just that simple. They hide their face, or they hide within the bureaucracy. They know they will not be held accountable. And we're seeing here today, we have a Congress that will hold them accountable. We're not going to have taxpayer dollars going to colleges and higher institutions that do nothing but teach hate and divide our country. So this is going to change, and I'm excited about being part of this. I just want to have a real quick question. Noah Rubin, Mr. Rubin, the lecturer, the Penn lecturer, Dwayne Booth, has quite a few very anti-Semitic posts or cartoons. Is he still employed by chance?
Yes, not only is he still employed, his website where he publishes the cartoons is on his official UPenn bio. It's being shared by the university.
Okay. The so-called Freedom School for Palestine in the universities, how have they responded to that group? Are you familiar with them at all?
Yeah, I've been told that since they're not an official group, the university can't specifically go after the group. What I can tell you is that as a part of that school, it's not only students, it's also professors, faculty. There's a case, many cases, at least one documented in the school newspaper, where a professor skipped his own class, skipped teaching his class to lead Intifada chants.
These are tenured professors?
That one is not tenured, but there are tenured professors and non-tenured professors.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to pass it. I think you guys are doing a remarkable job explaining what's going on. It's very obvious we need to make some changes, and I can promise you again, we will not tolerate bullies and cowards. We just do not. That's not the American way. So thank you guys so much for this. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Owens. Representative Torres, we're very honored to have you join us today. You're not on our committee, but we're pleased that you came, and so I would recognize you next.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for extending an invite. Thank you to the ranking member. I just want to commend the students. All of you have the moral clarity and the moral courage to speak out against anti-Semitism in the face of overwhelming intimidation and harassment, and none of you signed up for this, but all of you have risen to the occasion. You know, I find myself often quoting Dr. Martin Luther King, who said that history will record that the greatest tragedy is not the strident clamor of the bad people, but it's the appalling silence of the good people. And I have been appalled by the silence and indifference and cowardice of college and university presidents. I mean, what has become of higher education, to me, is a moral failure. You know, and I was thinking of Representative Stefanik's question. You know, if you ask the average American, is calling for a genocide of Jews harassment? The average American would tell you, of course, it's harassment. But if you ask an academic, is calling for a genocide of Jews harassment, you get a coldly legalistic, formulaic answer like it's context dependent. And it just seems to me the loss of moral common sense is not a bug, but a feature of higher education. But I also think that we as an institution are responsible. We have the power of the purse. And we are effectively subsidizing anti-Semitism. We are subsidizing anti-Zionist indoctrination masquerading as instruction. And so we in Congress and the federal government must do more to hold these institutions accountable. You know, Mr. Kestenbaum, who is I'm proud to have you as a constituent from Riverdale, you said that you reached out to the Anti-Semitism Task Force on 40 occasions and never received a response. You know, I've come to the conclusion that these institutions cannot be trusted to police themselves. Do you believe, as I do, that there should be some kind of on-site third-party monitor that holds these institutions accountable for combating anti-Semitism in their ranks?
Absolutely. There needs to be a federal monitor to make sure that Harvard is fulfilling its obligations, not just under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, but all their obligations to make sure that hatred and discrimination and bigotry is not part of their curriculum. And that is exactly what is happening today at Harvard, where students are indoctrinated to hate, where they are indoctrinated to think of one narrative, and the moment someone challenges it, that's when the anti-Semitism is brought to the surface. So, as I said from the beginning, I don't want to be in DC. I don't want to be missing class today to come speak in a committee room. But we have no other option because Harvard is either unable or unwilling to create the meaningful change that all of you are able and willing to do.
Well, thank you, Chairwoman, for the opportunity to speak.
And I thank you for your interest in our education. And Representative Allen, I recognize you.
There we go.
First, I want to thank all of you for your courage, not only fighting to end the rampant epidemic of anti-Semitism on college campuses, but also your willingness to share your experiences. My own church has been highly criticized because of our separation from the United Methodist Church, because of changes in the United Methodist discipline that do not line up with the God of the Bible. In fact, I'll probably criticize because I'd like to just take one quote out of the God of the Bible. And that is in Genesis 12:3. And it's the covenant God made with Abraham. He said, if you curse my people, I will curse you. If you bless my people, I will bless you. I brought that up to the presidents of those universities, and they had no idea where that quote came from. And they had, we are so Bible illiterate in this country. And how serious a matter is that? Members of Congress will say, God bless America. When is it we're going to have members of Congress say, God curse America? My question is, and I don't know who to direct this to exactly.
One person,
okay.
please.
Noah. I love the name. Who planted this seed? What started all this? You got to get to the root of the problem here. What generated this issue, do you think?
Oh, thank you for the question. I think it's super important that the Congress looks into, first of all, following the money. Where is the funding coming from? I personally have no idea where the money is coming from on UPenn's campus. And what I can tell you is that, from my perspective, it's coming from many of the professors in our community. Like I mentioned before, Dwayne Booth, a political cartoonist, posted blood libel cartoons and is still employed and still being propped up by the university. Professor Al-Mala goes to rallies and chants for an intifada and gets students riled up. At UPenn, we have a huge problem with outside extremists coming onto our campus. Like I mentioned in my opening testimony, they came not to call for a ceasefire or to have a nice little conversation about diplomacy. They came to vandalize our buildings. They came to light smoke bombs. They came to intimidate students. They were chanting in Arabic that Palestine should be Arab from water to water. They were saying things like glory to the martyrs and Al-Aqsa will only come through the soul and blood of our martyrs. These people are real extremists, and I think that's the root cause, is that we have extremists on our campus, and like some of the other students have said, there's no moral clarity by our administration to call out extremism.
Well, that's a problem in our culture today. Our own Speaker of the House of Representatives has been labeled a Christian nationalist because of his belief system. In other words, don't criticize me for my values. I won't criticize you for your values. You can't nationalize anybody. What has changed? Okay, I'm done. All right.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Grothman.
Okay. I can't help but noticing, this is both the Education and Workforce Committee, I can't help but noticing here today we're focusing on universities. And I'm sure you guys have internships and summer jobs and that sort of thing. You never hear of these stories on factory floors, at retail outlets, at farms, at construction sites, at airports. It just seemed, if the chairman wanted to do that, she wouldn't have found anybody to say how horrible it is to be at these places. But with the universities, I bet if the chairman wanted to, she could have found 4 times the number of people to testify. Can you give us can you guess as to why there seems to be such a huge problem on universities that we don't have at other areas where people congregate?
Please direct your question to one person, okay?
Okay, well,
because we don't have time for every student to answer the question. So
sure,
we'll
go to the gentleman at the end there.
Well, don't you want to spread it around a little bit?
Spread it around. We'll just start.
All right. Ask it to one of the other students.
Oh, he's best enough already. The gentleman next to you there, to your right.
Jacob.
Thank you so much for the question. I can't really speak so much to the workforce in general. I haven't really been part of the workforce. But I can tell you that there's this idea in college campuses where they're trying to, there's this sense of indoctrination that could, that is different, that you don't really find so much in the workforce.
Okay, it just seems worse at the university. Okay, next question. When you read about the university and the stuff that I get just from students I know, there seems to be an ideological straitjacket there, okay? For a country that's hypothetically 50% Republican, 50% Democrat, students I know complain that it seems like, you know, in the English literature departments or whatever, it's 100% or 95%, one way or the other. Mr. Gindi, could you give a stab at whether you think the overwhelming leftward tilt that you see at universities, you don't see at other work sites, is maybe part of the problem?
Sure, thank you. I would like to read you a quote from an article published in 2009 in the socialistworker.org titled "Behind the Myths About Hamas." The quote reads, "When we separate propaganda from reality, however, what we find is a group, Hamas, that has taken on the mantle of national resistance against Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands. Rutgers University thought that it would be a good idea to hire this person, to appoint this person rather, as the co-chair of our university committee on diversity, race, and gender. This is a person, an open public defender of Hamas, a terrorist organization. This person, Rutgers University, thought it would be a good idea to appoint, amongst other things, recommend initiatives pertaining to diversity." The proof is in the pudding. It's very clear that there's a moral rot among the people that the universities are hiring to implement DEI initiatives.
One final thing, the federal government can't get it. Okay.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Congresswoman Chavez DeRemer.
Thank you, Chairwoman Foxx and Ranking Member Scott, but more importantly, thank you to the students for being here today. These years of your life as college students should be about growing into adult and making lifelong friends, not fearing for your life because of who you are. If anything is clear from the disturbing rise in anti-Semitism since the October 7th attack, it's that anti-Semitism we're seeing right now isn't new. It was just waiting for an excuse to step out of its frightening shadow. For your professors and fellow students, their excuse to be openly anti-Semitic was watching the rape and massacre of innocent Israelis with an unnerving callousness. Telling you, as Jewish students, that rape isn't rape if the victim is Jewish, that the murder of civilians is resistance if the victims are Jewish. The United States of America is the safest place in the world to be a Jew, and now that is in question. If Jews aren't safe here, then where are they safe? Shame on anyone who is attempting to legitimize this violence, people who are continuing the systemic anti-Semitism in academia. Dr. Foxx, myself, and all the members here today will work to bring an end to that. You are surrounded by both Republicans and Democrats because we care. We see you. The world is seeing you. If your families are here today or are watching you, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what your students are going through. But your children are suffering today, and they've expressed that. But they are also heroes. Heroes in history is being made by you all. And you should be proud of your students, and you all should be proud because you are so brave. Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you for this day.
Thank you for yielding back. I believe, Mr. Williams, you're recognized, and I'd like to ask you again to keep your comments short and your questions short.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for convening this. I was a visiting student at Harvard for a year. I have a graduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania. I've lived in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I have friends up at 125th. I got to skip a little bit. I had an office at NJIT for a little while in your neighborhood. I lived in the shadow of Stanford. I've been on pretty much all of your campuses for extended periods of time. And the thing I most clearly want to convey to you is that I hear you and I believe you. And that's important for you to know, that you're seen and heard, and that you walk out of here confident that you have communicated that to people who care and, God willing, people that can make a difference. In my district, I've sat down with every university president in my district, and across the table, face to face, I said, if you allow anti-Semitism to continue on your campus, you are my enemy. And all of the consequences that come from that. I've pulled together an anti-Semitism task force on a regular basis to understand what's going on in my district. And it's important to me that members of Congress live with moral clarity at home and have an impact in their districts, not just here in DC when the cameras are on and the lights are on. I would ask, Kevin, just because you've been overlooked, I think, a little bit, and you've been in school for a long time as a post-grad. What single action would you recommend to a member of Congress? Chairwoman Foxx has convened this. She's going to take this up in committee. You've seen the work of Congresswoman Stefanik. We are serious about taking this on. But as an individual member of Congress in a community of 760,000 Americans, almost all of them containing some higher education, what would you ask of, what single action would you ask of that member of Congress to undertake in their district to put an end to anti-Semitism in their neighborhood?
Thank you so much for the question. So I'll say this, is that, once again, firing presidents is fine, but it doesn't get the job done. Systemic change is needed. I think one thing that we're all seeing across every single university is a systemic lack of interest in actually enforcing policies. At Stanford, this has been mind-boggling over the past month, where Stanford University has completely capitulated to a mob of angry students and changed their policies time after time after time to placate them, where Jewish students are implicitly following demands, orders, and directives, while the other side, anti-Jewish students, anti-Semitic students, are blatantly disregarding orders and breaching code of conduct violations, and the university is so scared of them that they backtrack several times. Read my report that I filed. Several times over the past month, they've backtracked from actually filing code of conduct charges on these students. So I would recommend two things. Is that first, make sure that the universities are actually enforcing their code of conduct as they should be, in a non-discriminatory way without any double standard. Jews are getting shafted here because we are the wrong type of minority sometimes, and we are not seen as people who should worry about discrimination, who should worry about bias, who should worry about racism. But unfortunately, this is having a massive impact in our lives. And the thing that it really comes down to, sometimes it actually isn't the university even enforcing their code of conduct. These students and non-students, because many of times there are non-student agitators who come onto our campuses who harass and intimidate Jewish students just for the hell of it, just because it's open season for Jews on our campuses, like my friend at Penn said. But what ends up happening is that for many of these universities, they own and operate their own municipalities. And what happens when you own and operate your own municipality is that you own and operate your law enforcement agency, your police department. What has happened time and time and time again on every single campus that my friends on this panel can tell you is that the universities actually stop their police departments from enforcing the laws that they are supposed to be enforcing. They are stopping the rule of law on our campuses. They're actually stopping investigations from student reporters or external reporters. I'll say this again. Things have gotten so bad at Stanford that the university president's house was vandalized last month. People can't find out exactly what happened because the university police department has probably gotten orders from the university to keep it quiet, and everybody that's tried to investigate it and access public police records is not allowed to access these things. So I'll yield my time, but that's it.
I would just, in summary, to summarize your comments, asking universities for their code of conduct and ask them to present that to my office, to ask their policy about non-student agitators, non-student folks participating on campus, and maybe bring the sheriff around, have a conversation with campus police, and have a heart-to-heart conversation about actual law enforcement without the university president oversight. Those would be good actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Representative Wahlberg.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for holding this. It was tough to listen to, and I'm glad I was able to hear all of the students speak, and thank you for doing that. My great-aunt Della Goldberg, who fled during the Holocaust to Sweden and met my uncle Fred Larson, would have said to each of you, and I hope you understand, as she would pat you on the head as she patted me, and my twin brother many times said, "God love you, God love you." And so just think of my Aunt Della Goldberg saying thank you in that way for what you shared today. Difficult. What you've talked about, I believe, is the clear state, the stinking state of higher education in our country today. Not just as the schools you are speaking of. I've been demonstrated against in speaking to the Jewish college group at University of Michigan, Michigan State University. Same things are going on. This is the stinking state of our higher education institutions in this country today. Not all, but many. And it's pervasive, and I think it goes beyond just anti-Semitism. I think it goes more using you at this time in history in further breaking down the greatness of this country and the freedoms of this country and the equal protection that this country has. And a number of you referred to that, rightfully so. DEI is a joke. And I believe, Yasmeen, I believe you indicated that that happened when you went to that entity. No help from them. Diversity, equity, inclusion. You've got to be kidding. And so this is a battle that sadly you are in the midst of right now. And as you stand strong, you will help some of the rest of us in trying to tear down what is stinking and rotten in our institutions today, and it's going to break down America and the freedoms that you and others have as well. A question I'm not going to ask you, any of you, be a short question for me and a long question for answering you, but why would you choose to stay? As opposed to leaving and vociferously saying, I'm leaving because of this and I'm going to an institution that'll help me. But by you staying, you're fighting an issue. I get that. So let me ask you, Hannah, at 28 years of age, I can't believe a woman would give her age, but you did. And you have stayed there at a place you wanted to be, at Berkeley. Have you or other Jewish students changed your behaviors and activities to avoid possibly being targeted with anti-Semitic harassment? Tell us a little bit about that, and that'll be my final question.
Thank you for that question. As I shared in my opening remark, it's not safe to be a Jewish student at Berkeley.
Microphone on.
It's not safe to be a Jewish student at Berkeley. We saw that Monday night. We even saw that before last semester when a Jewish student, his home was robbed and left the note, "Fuck Jews," from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. The university, they didn't call that an anti-Jewish hate crime. Same thing happened a month before when 2 different Jewish students were physically assaulted. Nothing. So the pattern we're seeing is that universities are not calling out hate against Jews when it happens, which is exactly what happened Monday night. We got an email the next day from the chancellor. There was zero mention of A, the student group that receives taxpayers' dollars that organized the riot, and B, the fact that it was explicit Jew hate. So when it comes to this question around, what can we be doing about it, we want schools to be taking it seriously, and same thing with Congress.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Scott, I recognize you for your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions, but I want to thank all the students for their testimony. The testimony really demonstrates the effect of allowing hostile environments on campuses and failure to address obvious violations of Title VI. Representative Owens reminded us that this is not new. Different categories of students have had problems. It's not limited just to anti-Semitism. In fact, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, LGBTQ plus students, Muslims have all been subject to this kind of these problems. Students are entitled under Title VI to safe learning environments and ability to learn and debate issues without hate and violence. We have enacted laws already to hold universities accountable. It's Title VI, and we enforce those laws through the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Education. We're not going to effectively deal with anti-Semitism without dealing with all the forms of discrimination. And so if we're going to do something, we need to call on OCR to respond to what we've heard, including what budget they need to enforce Title VI and address all forms of discrimination. In the White House report, they said they asked Congress to do one thing to deal with anti-Semitism, and that is to fully fund OCR. And we need to see what kind of budget they need to address this situation and to effectively deal with anti-Semitism and all forms of discrimination. So thank you, Madam Chair, for calling us together, and look forward to doing something effectively through the Office of Civil Rights.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. It'd be helpful if we could get more than 16% of the people of the department in the office to work. We have a report from the GAO that we have only 16% of the office space being occupied, and there might be more sentiment toward giving funds to the department if we had a few more people coming to work. Since you didn't ask a question, I'm going to take a personal privilege and ask 2 questions and take your questions. So, Eden, in November of 2023, the Columbia president suspended Columbia's chapters of the anti-Israeli groups, Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace. Can you talk about Columbia's failure to enforce that suspension and the impact it's had on Jewish students?
Absolutely, Chairwoman, and thank you for that question. I'd like to be abundantly clear that though Columbia suspended Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voices for Peace, they have not enforced that suspension. And these groups have been continuing to protest and rally and organize events on campus. Our university has neglected to enforce its policies. However, they have no problem enforcing those same policies against Jewish and Israeli students. Last semester, when a group at the School for Social Work organized an event about the, quote, significance of the October 7th counteroffensive, the School of Social Work president canceled the event, and the students continued to hold the event within the lobby of the building, blocking access and locking down the building to students that were simply trying to go to class. And instead of enforcing the rules and shutting down the event, Columbia administration provided umbrellas to the students in the lobby to protect their identities Meanwhile, they escorted Jewish and Israeli students out of the building and barred them from entering altogether. So at Columbia, we have a very, very obvious discrimination in the way that the rules are enforced, or rather, the way that the rules are not enforced. And I'd like to be abundantly clear. You asked how this is affecting the majority of the Jewish community at Columbia. Zionist is misconstrued as a slur across my campus and across American college campuses when it is a sanitized, it is a sanitized code for Jew, and it is used to intimidate and harass Jews by people that do not know the true definition of this word. And these two groups are perfect examples of that.
Have the security officers at Columbia been effective at keeping you all safe?
There have been 2 extreme instances of physical assault on my campus, and one was during an unauthorized protest on and around campus. The other was not. It was when a student was simply outside the library hanging up hostage posters. So to answer your question, no, Jewish students at Columbia have not been guaranteed safety by our university.
Hannah, on Monday night at Berkeley, there was a mob that rioted on campus, forcing the cancellation of a lecture on Israel, and there was violence against the Jewish students. Could you tell us more about what happened just this past week?
So when it comes to discrimination, it's not so much that something bad happens in the first place. What matters is how the university responds and whether they respond in a way that's consistent for the targeted group compared to any other group. What happened Monday was that Jewish students, they gave warning to the university that they were having this event. At first, the university refused to give any sort of security to the students. Then, when the students said, hey, we actually need security, the university then said, okay, we'll move this event to be off campus, which again, I said in my remark, Jews are told to stay away, off campus. The Jews said, no, we're doing this on campus because we get free speech too. What happened then is that the university sent some police. 15 minutes in, the students were evacuated. Fast forward, yesterday, I went with one of the Jewish students who was spit at and called a dirty Jew. I went with him to UCPD. He physically wrote a note to the police chief to meet with him. She wouldn't even meet with him. Instead, 2 other police officers met with the 2 of us. And when they met with us, imagine sitting there. You're next to a student who is literally spit on for their identity, and then the police says to you, well, we can't actually give you the video of this person being spit on, even if you tell us the exact moment of when it happened. I want to pause. That is what I dealt with yesterday. I skipped class to have that conversation. So when the university, I read articles about what happened, about them not having enough police, I say BS. They chose the response that they had, and this was coming, this riot, especially after every event that happened last semester that they refused to call anti-Jewish hate. When you do not call out hate against Jews based on shared ancestral identity, that sends the message to these other students on campus that it is okay and socially acceptable, tolerated behavior to actively hate Jews on campus. So when it comes to accountability, this morning we organized meetings. What we need is for Congress to actually use the power of the purse. You have tax status? Well, we have to change that.
Thank you very much. I want to, before we have concluding remarks, I want to recognize that we have representatives of numerous Jewish organizations here with us in the audience today. Adam Learman, President and CEO of Hillel International, is here. Also represented are the Jewish Federations of North America, the Anti-Defamation League, the Orthodox Union, the Louis D. Brandeis Center, the Tikva Fund, CAMERA, and the Endowment for Middle East Truth, and its president, Sarah Stern. We thank you all for joining us for this important roundtable, and I think the students should give them a round of applause. Now I want our audience to again give a round of applause to these incredibly courageous students. There are more of them. I'm sure we could have had a much larger panel had we had space and time to do it. But these students are informing us of what's going on their campuses, and it's important for us to hear about it. Now I'd like to recognize Mr. Scott if he has any closing remarks before I close.
Well, thank you very much. And again, we want to thank our students for demonstrating the problems on the campus. And I think it's up to us to do more than just complain. If we're going to actually do something, it's going to be through Title VI enforcement, through the Office of Civil Rights, and enforcing all forms of hate, violence, and discrimination. And that's something we can do, and I hope that we'll follow through on it. I yield.
Thank you. We not only should be going to the Office of Civil Rights, but as other members have said, we're not stopping with keeping the spotlight on this problem. This is a problem that is all over our country, and it is important that we, as members of the Education Committee, as well as people who care very much about education in this country, continue to put the spotlight on not just these institutions who are represented here today, but others who are not protecting the rights of Jewish students on their campuses. They are not doing what they should be doing. They are not serving as role models for the rest of our country and indeed the rest of the world. And so I want to say that this may not be the last U-table, I guess I should say, the last U-table or roundtable that we have, or the last hearing that we will have, or the last way for us to highlight this issue for the American people and beyond. These students, as well as all Jewish students attending any college or university in this country, supported with taxpayer funds, and there are only 7 colleges and universities in this country that are not getting some kind of taxpayer funds, so all the others do get some taxpayer funds. They must heed what's happening here and know that we are not going to stop with making sure that we do everything that we can here in the House of Representatives to make sure that these students are kept safe and are not, and that the universities are doing what they should be doing. Mr. Gottheimer, you're a little late. We're just about to end.
But I wanted to be here in any which way that I could to support what you're doing.
Well, thank you for coming, and we appreciate it. Next time, we'll hope that you'll come just a little earlier. God bless you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Our roundtable is adjourned.